screenfiles.com and review. And what I'm looking at today is 2019's I See You, directed by Adam Randall and written by Devin Gray. I See You takes place in a small town. And small towns, as typically depicted in movies and televisions, are places where families feel safe, where you don't have to lock your doors, where there's no fear of someone being shot in a drive-by shooting, for instance. To an extent, that's true. But small towns hold their own particular sources of fear and terror. The story starts with a young person named Justin Whitter, who we happen to see riding his bike. He's on the way home and he happens to ride through a forested area when he is suddenly propelled off of his bike backward. We don't know what caused it, we don't know why it's happening. Though what we come to learn is that Justin Whitter vanishes after that event has happened. His bike is found, he is not. So now, people are afraid. This small town starts to resemble a little bit more the average city, where people do have to lock their doors, and parents are a little more concerned if their children don't turn up at the time that they're supposed to be home. One of the people in charge of finding Justin Whitter is Detective Greg Harper. Initially, it seems like the point of this movie is to discover where Justin Whitter is and whether or not he is alive or dead. Movies revolving around people vanishing aren't unusual, and this looks like it could be potentially a really good one. But the movie begins to change in that the longer it goes on, the less relevant Justin Whitter's vanishing seems to the plot, which is really irritating for me. You don't open up with a kid literally being pulled off a bicycle by something and not continue exploring that storyline. But as I said, it moves away from that and it begins to involve itself with the family of Detective Greg Harper. Apparently, the Harper household is going through more than a little bit of friction. It appears his wife, Jackie, played by Helen Hunt, is or was in an affair with someone, and it's fracturing the family. The son, Connor, played by Judah Lewis, dislikes his mother passionately because he blames her for what's going on. And Greg Harper, played by John Tinney, is somewhat accepting of what's going on. He's not happy about it, nor is he as confrontational as his son. In any case, as I said, the thrust of the movie is changing, and it's really irritating me. So I also should say that occasionally, let's say Justin's mother would talk to Jackie Harper about her son and how the investigation is doing. So the movie keeps you in the Justin Whitter angle, but it doesn't spend a lot of time there. It feels like it is moving away from it, which, as I said, is frustrating to watch. But another storyline is introduced. So originally you started with the vanishing of Justin Whitter. It sort of morphs into a story about Detective Greg Harper and his family disintegrating. Now it moves to a story revolving around two Froggers. That's spelled P-H-R-O-G-G-E-R-S, which are people who live in the house of other people without their permission or knowledge, sometimes when they actually are still there. And this is a very real thing. Let's say you have a relatively large house, which is the only way this can really work. So you'd have someone living in a crawl space, living in an unused room without your knowledge that they were there. And sometimes these people are somewhat sociopathic in nature, which is to say they try to fuck with the people that live in the house. And they do this in really interesting ways. They'll move things around. They'll open cabinets and not close them. They'll eat food, and the people who live in the house will wonder what's happening, because none of them would have done these things that they're seeing. As I said, it's a really weird thing. And Alex Travers is a sociopath. But the thing about Alex Travers, played by Owen T, who's great in the role, by the way, is that he seems to be working his way up towards being a psychopath. Which is to say, he not only likes to move things around and to remove pictures, and to do all sorts of weird things to upset whomever lives in the house, but he likes to fuck with them in other, more insidious ways. This is the opposite of Mindy, his friend, played by Libby Barrett, in that she just wants shelter and a nice place for a period of time. She does what she does and moves on with no one the wiser. Once again, this is not Alex's motivation though. So he eventually drugs Mindy so that she's knocked out and he can go and do whatever he wants to do in these people's house. And I should mention, by the way, the house that Mindy and Alex Travers are in is the house of Detective Greg Harper. While investigating the case of Justin Whitter, he started to notice weird things happening. Nothing to necessarily make him nervous, because he has issues with his wife and his relationship is not doing well. So what I think is happening is that he's assuming that his wife is taking pictures from the wall or that type of thing. He's never thought that there's someone else, well, there are other people living in his house. So now the story is even moving away from the relationship between Jackie Harper and Greg Harper. So now I'm wondering, what is going on with this movie? Now keep in mind something though. It's well acted, it's very well shot. So what's happening could not be an accident. It feels very deliberate to me. And it's beginning to really bug me because I want this movie to focus on one thing and tell me that story as best it can. Instead, it's veering off into various tangents. Stick with it. Because this movie is amazing. Because what it does, it begins to come around. Which is to say, it started with the vanishing of Justin Whitter, and it ends with the vanishing of Justin Whitter. And all the events that I mentioned prior, such as the acrimony in the relationship between Jackie Harper and Greg Harper, as well as what's going on with their son Connor, and the Froggers, all coalesce, and it all balances out. This is a shockingly well done movie. And the thing is, you don't often see movies that work out quite as well as this one does. I've seen movies before try to start with one thing, moves to another thing, yet never quite makes it back to the beginning, and ends up, well, not terrible, oftentimes a bit of a mess. This is not one of those movies. It starts at one point, seems to take tangents, but gets right back to where it was. And I think it's important to mention, it does so in a very logical way. You will not see this movie coming. You will not see where this movie is going. It is just that well made. I'm unaware of who Adam Randall is, and I've never heard of Devin Gray before I see you. Though how Randall and Gray aren't much better known to me, as someone who watches a lot of movies, is just mind-boggling, because what they do with this movie is masterful. It works. Though, as I implied, you have to let it travel its course. Don't presume to know where it's going, because I'm pretty sure you won't. Let it go. Just sit back, let it wash over you. It will make sense. And events will culminate, I think, satisfactory for you. Which leads to a question I had with White Raven. Would I call I See You a horror movie? Probably not, if only because the twistiness of the story is given priority. It's not overly violent, but it's very filled with tension and suspense. It works extremely well. And by my reckoning, a lot of the credit for why this movie works as well as it does goes to Alex Travers, who is played by Owen T. Because this is a genuinely sinister looking young person. He acts really, really well, but he looks fucking creepy. And when you see some of the things he does, you accept it. He puts himself in this real dark space so well, you just roll with it. And that's something I think needs repeating. Just roll with it, and I think you will find I See You a great thriller. Horror adjacent thriller, I might add, but a thriller nonetheless. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.